Hi, everyone, and welcome to Get Creative with Suffolk Public Library. Our project for the month of May is going to be working with some upcycling, recycling some of our vintage book pages, and we're going to be doing some watercolor painting on them. The reason that we're doing watercolor painting on these is we'll still get plenty of translucency through the paint, so we'll still get this lovely texture from the book. I've got a couple of different types on here. I've got one that's a little bit more chunked up and one that's, your classic full paragraphs. When you do request a kit and you get your kit picked up, you'll get a nice handful of pages, so you feel free to take a few chances at it. And you'll get a watercolor set. This one is my personal set, but you'll still get a perfectly usable beginner starter set. You'll have everything that you need. Some other things that you might like to have around when you're getting set up is some paper towels or some napkins, just something to absorb and clean your brush. I recommend having either a little extra piece of plastic, or you can do it in the top of your watercolor palette in case you want to mix any of your colors, especially with a starter palette. You only have a few colors, but you can mix them just like other paints in a nice flat surface. I recommend also you're going to need some kind of water to activate your watercolors. A cup of water on the side is going to be just fine for you. If you want to take it an extra step, I have here, it's just a little tiny spray bottle, and I'm going to show you in a little bit how I use the spray bottle to enhance the color that I get out of my watercolors. If you want to draw your design first, you're more than welcome to, but something you should know with watercolors is if you draw in pencil underneath and then paint the watercolors over it, you are still going to see the pencil line. I don't usually mind it. I typically will go over the final lines with a pen to give it like a nice outline, but if that's not your style, if you'd prefer to have just a clean look without either the pencil line or a pen line, then you can freehand and start painting. So we're going to go ahead and get started here in a minute. Now, one of the biggest things that we're going to need to keep an eye on, and that's going to be our largest challenge really in working with book pages, especially with watercolors, is these are going to be a lot thinner than a typical watercolor page, or even you can use cardstock for watercolors. These are going to be a lot thinner than that. The way that I'm going to solve it for myself is I'm just going to stack a couple of them together, and for me it happens to be they were together in the folio of pages, so they're already pretty stuck together, so it works for me. If you only want to use a single page, you want to get the most out of your pages, then what I would recommend is putting down either a paper towel or a spare piece of paper underneath, and then taping all of your edges down. And what that's going to do is it's going to help keep your paper taut and help try to avoid some of the wrinkling that you can get with watercolors, that it, saturates the paper and gets really puffed up and wrinkly. So if you tape it down, you'll have a little bit more tension on your page, and then if you give the paper somewhere, or the watercolor somewhere to go underneath, as like a scrap paper, newspaper, sheet, whatever it is that you have, that'll help absorb some of the extra as well. But what I'm going to do is I don't particularly mind for myself having the pencil lines, so I'm just going to do a quick sketch. And if you know the book that you're reading, it could be really fun to do a design based on what the book is, either a reference from within it or something similar. I have not read this book. This is, we're getting some scrap pages that have pieces kind of fallen apart. But what I'm doing for this one is I'm just kind of replicating or doing a little version of what it looks like, this little holly branch collection here. So it'll be a nice echo of the ones that are here. Because like I said, we're going to get a couple of different, it's going to be pretty translucent once we finish up. So we'll still be able to see underneath both the page, like the letters and everything, as well as for me, all of these little tiny designs that are really lovely. And so it'll be pretty obvious where the image came from. I'll do a couple of the little buds around here. That's one of the other things that if you wanted to do something that's not necessarily related to the piece or to the book that you're using, is if you want to think about what things are really great that have a lot of wonderful texture that you're excited to do, because these pages, these words, they're going to give you a lot of texture. It's going to be a really nice extra element and almost like shading or cross-hatching that you would add yourself. We can use it here, and we can do a few different things to enhance them with just a little bit of shading. With our watercolors and our paints, we're going to be able to enhance some of that texture that we're going to get from the page itself. So the way that I like to personally use watercolors is actually by giving the pans themselves a little bit of a spritz beforehand. Like I said, I've got this little water bottle sprayer here, and I'm going to use this to just lightly douse my pan, especially these like greens that I'm planning on using. And this helps the color really show. It helps the pigment in the color really just come alive before you even add it to your brush. And these are all pretty small pans, so I've oversprayed a little bit, but the places that, these reds that I might use for a berry or two, or these oranges that I'm probably not going to use, they'll dry up and they'll just be alright. It's not going to affect them at all. So I'm going to start here by moving some of that water that we sprayed on this olive green and just picking some of it up. And then I haven't wet my brush too much, so it's going to come through with some of that texture. If I want my brush a little bit wetter, and to see what kind of color I'm going to get from there, you can see it's going to be a little bit thinner. And I'm probably going to use a mixture of these textures of the wet paint and the dry brush, and then the wet paint and the wet brush. So for watercolors in particular, you really want to start with some of the lightest colors, especially the lightest colors in an area that you're planning on using, because it's very hard to put light on top of dark with watercolors. You can always make it darker. It's pretty difficult to make something significantly lighter with watercolors other than just adding extra water and then sopping up what's left, and that you lose a lot of control over the end product and how things are sitting, and well, you lose a lot of control. It's not the best. It is a solution if you are in dire need of one, but it's not the best. So, like I said, I'm just applying it all over these leaves here. And because these are holly bushes, or at least I'm choosing to make them more of a holly, holly, if you don't know, it's a pretty dark green. So even though this olive is a little bit darker, it's still probably going to be one of my lighter colors in the final piece. And then, as always, if you want some spots with highlights, you can use the same color and just dilute it a little bit. And if you go back in the pan and get some of that darker color, and we can just add a little bit more water to the brush and mix our darker color in with the rest. And I like moving from dark to light when I am pulling it straight from the pan, because I know that when it comes from the pan, that's going to be the most pigmented, the darkest that shade is going to be. So I like moving from my areas that I want pretty dark, and then adding more water to my brush as I move into some of these lighter areas. And you can see I'm kind of keeping my little shading like that. This one is going to be underneath a lot of the others, so it's probably going to be darker in general. So I'm going to keep going on this. Alright, my cat has joined us for the final little bit. So you can see here that you get a lot of lovely, like I was saying, texture with the words on there. What I'd recommend is, especially if you have areas that you want to build up as your shadows, taking your base wash of color and then doing some of that wet brush, the dry brush stippling around it, and then blending it out. Having that darker plus the words is a really nice addition to the way that it looks. I am pretty much just about finished with this one. A couple of things that you want to remember, and especially for a first attempt, something that's kind of small like this, it doesn't cover the entire page, it's not a whole wash of page, is going to be better for your, for avoiding some of that warping like we were talking about. So I hope you have fun. If you would like to join us, you're really in the way. If you'd like to join us, you're more than welcome to. We can be doing this in person, as well as you can request your kit and pick up a kit of supplies at Suffolk Public Library. Just have to check our calendar, and we'd love to have you. We'll see you next time for Get Creative.